Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at Venus's square to Saturn. Now this is, well, I'll go ahead and put it up on the real-time clock. This is a transit that we've been anticipating for a little while. I've talked about it in my monthly overview and spent time talking about it in a number of places this month because it's right in the mix of so many intense transits that we've been going through. Mars has turned direct, the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. We had a big Mercury-Saturn square right around the beginning of November. So there's been a lot, and there's still a lot to come. We have eclipses to look over later this month, and a big, huge December with Jupiter and Saturn changing signs into Aquarius. So it's been a really lively month. Anyway, what's happening right now is Venus in the sign of Libra is in an overcoming square, superior square to Saturn. I will be doing hopefully a Q&A episode because some people have been asking me about the nature of superior versus inferior aspects. What are they? How do they work? This is something I cover in depth in my classes, but I think Kat and I will probably do a Q&A video to explain it to people, just in case you've never heard of it before. So in this case, Venus has the upper hand in the dynamic. That's what being in the overcoming or superior square means. Venus is going to move through the square to Saturn over the next couple of days. It's today on Wednesday. It will be, more or less in the process of perfecting. It goes through the full perfection of that process by Thursday. So Wednesday, Thursday of this week, that's when we're really feeling this. But you could have already been feeling it as early as the beginning of this week when the Venus enters into about a 3-degree range. And you'll also feel it right up until Venus changes signs into Scorpio on the 21st. So, it has a little bit of a zone in which you can feel the effects that's not just specific to the exact day that a transit happens. So you'll always hear me mentioning, kind of between this and this time, but the peak of the transit is tomorrow excuse me, I'm making this on Tuesday. It's Wednesday that we're doing this video for. So it'll be Wednesday into Thursday. So, and then you might feel it lingering around, into Friday a bit as well. So anyway, what does this transit entail? What is a Venus transit all about? So that's what I want to, and these are the themes that you could look for. Not all of them will be applicable, but some of them should be. And one of the best ways to notice this is not necessarily to go around, like sitting in the bushes with your binoculars, like looking for Venus and Saturn, but more just, maybe if you have a journal, or just at the end of the day, take a moment to reflect upon what's been happening in your life. Maybe re-listen to the videos. That's the best way to start bringing, almost like taking the transits and becoming sensitive to them, being able to notice them. For example, when you do astrology for a while, you should basically start to go, like, in the midst of something happening, you should be like, something's happening. What the heck is going on? Right? You're like, I know this is a transit. I can feel it. It suddenly feels like the whole karmic field around you is shifting in some really important way. Some people get really obsessive over this, by the way, and they'll spend all day long being like, oh my God, did you feel that sensitive, tiny little shift? And then they'll try to assign it to the planets. And I think that's kind of a mistake. So don't go, I would say be careful not to overdo it. But, when you've got transits happening, week by week, and some of them are perfecting. It is helpful to pay attention to what's happening, to make note of it, even to share your story somewhere, just so that you start articulating your experience with the planets. Interestingly, then they start coming into your body and mind. You start to be able to sense and feel the events that they reflect. So, anyway, that's just an aside. Okay, so Venus square Saturn. Love and pain. Here we have Venus as love and Saturn as the reality of suffering or pain. This is a good thing and a bad thing. A lot of the most important experiences that we have in our life of intimacy with other people have a way of, those moments are infused with elements of relief from suffering, or of suffering, and there can be the bittersweetness of suffering, of things that have been endured. Venus Saturn is also associated with love and time. So love and time and love and suffering go together because, in a sense, over time, we're bound to suffer. And so because we suffer, but because we also persist in maintaining and keeping loving connections in our life, because we feed them and nourish them, because we're affectionate, then the pain has a way of becoming part of the shape of the intimacy that we share. And that's so important. So Venus Saturn can be periods of time where there are pain and difficulties, but they're the kind of difficulties that build character in the long run. I was thinking, for example, my wife posted a photo somewhere, I think it was Facebook or Instagram, and it was, it was one of those things that pop up saying you did so many years of Facebook, I think. So many years ago, you did this today or something like that. And it was a picture of one of the first dates I took my wife on when I was still living in New York City and she was in DC. And she came up to New York City, and we went up to the top of the Empire State Building. She had never done it before. I had actually never done it before at that point either. So even though I'd been living in Manhattan for 3 years. So anyway, that popped back up and we were reflecting on everything and just kind of jokingly being like, God, would you have signed up for this if you would have known what you would go through over the next 10 years? Not in any way reflective of our love for each other, but just like, I think this is true for any committed relationship. This is my philosophy anyway, that if you knew the mix of sorrow and joy both there, but if you knew that it wasn't going to be just bliss, that there would be all different life challenges that you would share together in a relationship with someone, like, would you sign up for it? And of course our answer was yes, but it's just was interesting because, kind of remembering ourselves standing on the top of the Empire State Building being like, wow, there's a lot of things we've endured together. And that is like a fine wine. I say this about Venus Saturn all the time, but Venus Saturn ages just like a fine wine should. Or it can be reflective of the harder and more painful truths that come with love in any form. And also the importance, there's a saying that I've heard, and it's love me little, but love me long, and sometimes there's a way in which we don't like that when we're in the romantic phase of a relationship, or the honeymoon phase, or when we're young and we're really daydreaming about meeting our, like a soulmate or something like that. And so the phrase "love me little but love me long" could sound like, there's going to be very little warmth, there's going to be very little affection, but you'll be together for a long time. And that could be one of the Venus Saturn significations, like not a lot of love, but a lot of time. But I think "love me little but love me long" is also, I think that there's a way of understanding that quote in terms of the endurance of love. Passion, the word passion means to suffer with, there's a way of suffering with something. To have passion for one another is not just something that we experience, in other words, in the moments of elation, but it's also in the trials and in the suffering. But we somehow find a way to still burn with love for the other in the midst of even our dislikes of each other, or the harder passages that we may go through, for example, in each other's families, or in each other's careers, or with each other's health, all sorts of things that we endure. But somehow in the midst of the suffering, we choose to burn and feel and suffer with the other. And that joins us to people in a very deep way that can transform that sense of "love me little but love me long" into love me long, little by little by little. Because it's easy to make grand gestures of love, especially in the beginning. But when we have to water our relationships with love over many, many years, my experience has been that it requires us to make sure we're feeding love in small ways constantly. The presence of love in a relationship. It's the hug when you get up in the morning. It's a small acts of generous affection. And I know there was a book that came out some years ago. I think it was a long time ago now. It was about the 5 languages of love. Have you guys heard of this before? Right. So it's, everyone has a different way that they like to be loved. But the point is that if you want to receive love, you also have to give it. And you have to give it not just in the way that you like to do it, but in the way that the other person wants to feel it. And so learning how to love other people over time, being persistent in small acts of affection, build this sense of there's a vintage in each of us, in each of our relationships, that has to build by the small choices we make to be loving as we also endure many things together. That's a Venus-Saturn combination. Love also has to have limits and has to be defined and is made of the rituals that we create together and the way that we are disciplined and committed to each other, the way that there's a center of gravity between ourselves, our friendships, our lovers, even relationships with children. So limitation with Saturn, but also narrowing our field of activities to reflect the commitments that we have to the love that we share with certain people in our life. Beauty and law, that's another one with Venus Saturn, where you can have this sense of the way in which the correct, just, wise thing is also very beautiful. And judgment and beauty go together as well in this combination, for example, to point out the difference between vanity and superficiality and real substance, where something is feigning some appearance of beauty or grace or kindness or diplomacy, but is actually deeply self-centered, and you feel the hollowness behind it. That can be a Venus-Saturn dynamic. Also, the idea of austerity, that we desire things, but that we learn to limit our own cravings and desires. That's a Venus-Saturn. Beauty and darkness, or beauty and plainness or simplicity. Darkness is a Saturn motif. Venus-Saturn can sometimes bring out the kind of melancholic black and white beauty, as well as it can also speak to plain or simple things, even minimalist kinds of things. Of course, Venus and Saturn can bring abandonment or a feeling of alienation in love or in relationships, or some sense of the hard reality underlying the appearance. Loss of friendships or impediments to harmony or agreement, just the blockages of Saturn that can come up. Admiration and jealousy. Venus-Saturn can have a lot to do with lust and envy, and also the desire to hoard things or possess things. The reason for that is that Saturn, long throughout the history of astrology, has been associated with the Greek god who eats his own children in envy and worry that they will usurp him and take over. He wants to be dominant, and so the greed associated with Saturn, the hunger and the lust and the desire to suppress other things, that can come through somehow in terms of our own appetites, desires, or in terms of not wanting other people to take over. So we do things to try to block them or set them back. And maybe finally is this question about beauty, wealth, prestige, and power in the world. Venus, Saturn, often reflective of like high culture, but sometimes also the way that people lord money, resources, education, class over other people, as well as questions about fairness in regard to insiders versus outsiders. So those are some of the themes that are in the air right now, and it'll be interesting to see how they play out. I would love to hear your stories. Don't forget that my annual Kickstarter starts in the next couple of days. The last 40 calendar days of the year, I have an annual fundraiser where I ask all of you who enjoy my work to pitch in if you can. There's a bunch of rewards you can choose when you do so. Every year we have a goal that we're trying to get to. I've been doing this about 7 years now. And last year we hit 690 backers supporting my work in 2020, this year, from which I was able to hire Kat and Delia to work with me and other really cool stuff that you guys helped me to do. So this year, our goal is to surpass 690 by, just one backer. See if we can do a little bit better, go to 691. If we beat that goal, that'll be awesome. But regardless, I'll be telling you more about that coming up. So stay tuned. And I really appreciate all of you and look forward to doing more later this week. All right. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.